Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked
and sometimes what didn't.
You will also hear very personal experiences
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode.
Today, you will listen to the career story of Indra Vidyaprakash, Vice President for Workday and Chennai Site Leader. You will hear fascinating stories of grit and determination, of starting fresh in college in PSG Tech and moving to Cornell University, learning the ropes of software, operating systems. And she shares how she enjoyed being in software as well as moved to the product domain in Oracle, working with customers and understanding the problems in the pre-cloud era, and moved into cloud and building that basic curiosity and always learning, building the momentum across the roles in Workday and Oracle. She shares some of the fresh perspectives of how to think about impediments as well as creating a joyful arena that you are working with by creating an environment where everybody can be successful and accessible for all. Listen on. Hi Indra, so happy to have you in the Software People Stories. Welcome.
Thank you, Gayatri. Thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
So for those who don't know Indra Vidyaprakash, she is the site leader for Workday and a senior director and extraordinary career development across two behemoths, Workday and Oracle. Today we will talk to Vidya right where she started her career in back in Coimbatore. So Indra, I'm going to take you back to Coimbatore and understand what pulled you into software.
Okay, so from a very young age, I was really fascinated by, it was more about problem solving, okay? And that's kind of how it started for me. As a young kid, I remember I was very fortunate that my dad had bought for my brother and I an Atari game. So that should, I probably have dated myself on that, but that was like this really cool gadget that we got at that time. You could play games on it, but it also had like these small programs that you could create. Like back in the day, you could have all this logical programming that you did. So I still remember that was like my first sort of, time when I started interacting with programming, logic, problem solving, and I was completely fascinated by it. And then I really knew from then that I really wanted to get into sort of that math, computers. It was all very new at that time, when I was studying back in school. And that's how my career really, or I wouldn't, not career at that time, obviously, right? It was just, this is what my passion is. This is what I want to do. I want to like solve problems. I'm so fascinated by all these programming languages. So back in the day, it was you were learning BASIC and Fortran, and those were the languages that I learned. And then when it came to like going to college, it became natural that I again chose like computer science and engineering. So that's how I really started, falling in love with computer science. And till today, technology, problem solving is still something that I'm fascinated by.
Excellent. Problem solving. I have actually heard stories right from writing algorithms or making tea or having a nice AC room pulled me to software. I think you're the first one who has come and told that problem solving pulled me into software. So you did your engineering in PSG Tech, and PSG Tech even today when I go to Coimbatore, it's a extremely esteemed college, and it attracts amazing set of students. And did you go into campus placement? You did got it, or you directly went into MS after that?
Okay, so my journey, I am just to give you some of my background. I am from Coimbatore originally, where PSG, was founded. I am part of that founding family as well, so I'm very, privileged
Wow.
that I got to study in that institution. My grandfather was one of the founder trustees, G.R. Damodaran, who set up the college. So from him is where I got the passion of learning, education, and how that is so important, having always that growth mindset. Now, I did, at that time, when you're young, my aspiration really was to go into another college. I was like, hey, I've lived in Coimbatore so long. It's one of those things, right, where you live at home and you're like, no, I actually want to go somewhere else and study. So I really, really wanted to go to Anna University, actually. But finally, I think didn't get, I had really good marks, but still didn't manage to get in there. And then, eventually got into PSG Tech, where I, was very fortunate again to be able to do computer science and engineering there. When I graduated from PSG Tech, I actually got a placement into HCL. Uh, at that time, HCL had an office here in Chennai. So I actually spent 1 year working in Chennai. And then I did want to come to US to do masters. Again, like my goal was at that time computer science. There was so much happening in the US also in terms of, computers, computer engineering. So then I applied to get my master's at Cornell University in New York State. And then after a year at HCL Tech, and again, it was a very great experience in Chennai, working for HCL Tech. It was an R&D lab at that time, doing, in fact, hardware. It was a lot more on the hardware, circuit boards. And again, that was something at that time, didn't know whether I wanted to go into hardware or software, right? It was more of, like I said, computer engineering. What are the problems you're trying to solve? But it was very fascinating, of course, and then landed up in Cornell to do my master's. Again, a very great experience, right? The way of teaching itself, like everything from, like how, you interact with your professors, the way you're taught, a lot more self-taught, in the US when you get there. Really went deep into some of the computer engineering principles. I remember taking courses like operating systems, and that was when Java had just come in, the internet had come in. So there's the fascination of, oh my God, you can go in and, even if it's like the green terminal, right, where you're, asking questions or trying to look up stuff on the internet. Email was like a new thing back then. Programming, a lot of like graphics, a lot of, graphics processing, image processing was new as well. So learning that. So just really, and then above it all, having that experience of being in, a campus in the US, working with other international students, like a lot of exposure to that, international arena as well. So it was a very enjoyable time at that time that I got into the college there, did my master's. And again, from college in Cornell is where Oracle had then come for campus recruiting. And I was fortunate to get placement via that, and then landed up in Silicon Valley, of course, right? Like at that time, everybody wanted to go to Silicon Valley, and it was that really big aha moment for me when I landed there and I got a job with Oracle.
And that would have been the right at the .com boom, right? When you would have been in Silicon Valley, all the big ones, right, including pet stores to all of them were trying to create their own website, e-commerce, and so on and so forth. How
Yeah.
did that
So
phase feel?
Yeah, so I started in my career at Oracle in 1997 as working there as a software engineer. So I did definitely, I think around the 2000s is when we saw that .com boom, right, the e-commerce. So I got to see all of that, but I felt like I was still at Oracle at that time, so I got to see all of that, but from sort of, I would say, the safety and comfort of being at Oracle. Oracle, obviously, a very big company. When I joined them itself, they were about 25,000 people at that time. In 1997, there were about at least 25,000 people worldwide, who worked at Oracle. So it was a great experience even there, being part of that enterprise, seeing how to interact with customers, the type of software the customers were asking for, and building for that, and also building at scale, right? Like learning how to build, software at scale scale, like thinking about performance and security for enterprise customers. Like it was a lot of great experience, and also got to like work with a lot of great people, like smart people. And eventually, like Oracle, we have, I think, like so many alumni around the world now, like people who left and started other companies and, slowly started to build up that network as well in Silicon Valley. So even though I was not part of like a startup at that time, you were right there in the middle of it, right? And working with the people there or using some of the technologies that came out of that. So definitely a very interesting time to be in the Silicon Valley at that time.
Yeah, and Oracle and HP made it very cool to work out of your own garage and built that sort of fashion statement to wear your simple, t-shirts and your pants, right? When you were in that product, when you were in the engineering and moved to product management in Oracle, I don't think that point in time product management was that well known, right? At least when I was in working for Infosys during the, if I'm able to relate to the same time, it was all around projects, program management, because I was in the services space.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense given that Oracle had like huge products and it needed that product management, understanding where your customers are and how the customers are using it and so on and so forth. How did you go about being a product manager and what made you fascinate towards that? Because this is your when you are delivering through a CD, right? You are, or I don't know if floppy disk, I'm not sure, but it
Definitely,
would
there
have
were
been a CD.
CDs. We literally shipped CDs out to our customers back then.
So how did that transition came about, Indra? I'm very curious about it.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, it wasn't it. I'm not going to say it was hard or a challenging problem, but definitely took me some time. Okay, so like I said, I started as a software engineer and just really enjoyed that whole process. Learning a lot, brand new. In a company like Oracle, like a lot of resources available to us. Also had the mentorship of some really good engineering, senior engineering people who had been there as well. So I did that for quite a while. I almost spent about 8 years as a software engineer, like moving between different teams at Oracle, like learning new products and all of that. And then, at that time, it was very much like you said, sort of that waterfall method, right? Like somebody came and gave you a requirement, like a project manager or your manager, or we did have product managers as well, marketing. So you got some kind of requirement. Somebody wrote a document, you like sort of handed off to you, and then you went and did like the problem solving, the solution, the coding, and then you like sort of handed it off back. Like you said, eventually the software got loaded onto some CDs and then shipped off to a customer. And then for me, I always felt like, okay, who's really using my product? Like I'm doing all this work. What are they doing with it? Is somebody using it? Do they like it? Is there something wrong with it? Like, sure, you'll hear about bugs that came in, but what was really happening behind the scenes? Like how are customers using it? So I felt like I never had that sort of interaction with the customer or that end user. I wouldn't even call it the customer. At that time, it was almost like, wait, who's using all this stuff? Do they really like it? Like what's going on? So at that point, I'd done, computer science, engineering for about, the software development phase. I felt like, okay, I've gone through phases. I'd worked on a couple of different teams as well at Oracle, seen a couple of different product lines, and then started really feeling like, okay, what next, right? Like both from a career perspective, how do I grow? What are some new skills I can learn? So at that time, I decided to actually take a break. I said, I want a break. I think I want to maybe go do an MBA or something, right? Like I felt like maybe I don't have some business aspect. Like, should I go study something about the business, right? Like, let me think about what I want to do next. I wasn't really sure what I want to do. It wasn't very clear, but I decided I would just take a break during that time. So I said, okay, let me take some time off. My family also, in India, some of my grandparents weren't doing too well. And I thought it's also a good time I can come and spend some time with them while they were still fine. So I came to India, actually spent a couple of months. I took some time off. I traveled. So all that was really great. And then, of course, it was 6 months. I'm like, okay, now I need to get a job again. I need to figure out what I want to do. So I was pursuing two things. So I was like, should I do an MBA? Because product management might be one area. So I'd be talking to a lot of product managers at that time, both people I knew from within Oracle itself, I'd worked with, and externally, to say like, hey, if I wanted to switch to it, what kind of skills do I need to have? Do I really need an MBA or not? So those were two things that I was pursuing. And then an opportunity came along where one of the managers who I'd worked with, one of the PMs who I'd worked with at Oracle, they had mentioned that there was a product management opportunity sort of in the same area where I had been an engineer. So which meant like I knew the space, but I had to learn how to be, a product manager and learn those skills. So I interviewed for this position and actually went back then to Oracle again as a product manager for one of the teams that I had worked with. And again, very fortunate that, I'd built up some network of, colleagues out there in Oracle, and was able to, be in a part of a product management team. And they were, mentoring me on, product management skills, and eventually grew into it. And I really started enjoying it. That interaction, especially at that time, I think, we were moving more towards not so much the waterfall method, but getting into that, okay, what do customers really want? Why are we building? Don't just solution something. Make sure we're really, addressing the problem for a customer, their end users, and solving problems for them. There was also the time, where it was a lot more design-centric, design-focused, user-centric, solving problems for users. So I started really enjoying all of that, right? Like talking to our customers, hearing from them on what problems, they're having, being able to like then work with the engineering team from the other side and provide solutions. That was something that I really started enjoying. So that was like that switch for me between, from software engineering or software developer into product management.
Wow, this is fantastic. Yeah, in terms of, I thought it would have been somebody had told, try this for some time, and that is the story I was expecting. This is fantastic story, Indra, in terms of self-discovery, building your own muscle in terms of talking to, customers, and creating that design thinking. Right now, design thinking is the in thing, right? Everybody talks about
Right.
customer experience, user experience. And so did you have to learn also those things in terms of analytics, customer experience, user experience, and how to build all of that as
Yeah.
part of being a product manager?
Definitely, yeah. I think those are skills that I had to learn, like sometimes it was certification courses, sometimes even just, working. I remember like if there are designers, user experience people, like just sit down with them, right? Like learn from them what they do. You go on like customer visits, you sit in on like usability testing, for example, right? And you just follow almost like just shadowing someone even, and you learn all these practices. So I think that's like some of the different ways in which people can get experiences, right? It's not always you're learning from a textbook or you're learning now online, but sometimes it's about just sitting down with the people and seeing like, things in action.
Oracle also is huge on conferences. I'm sure now conferences both online as well as offline has become center stage. And if I remember, Silicon Valley actually brought in that coolness in conferences, including gaming and those goodie bags and t-shirts and whatever, and all those paraphernalia, which made it very cool. Earlier, conferences used to be that suitcase and going and attending boring ones, but I think
Right.
were you
No, we had
part
some
of that?
amazing. Yeah, no, that was one of my highlights as a product manager, because we got to go to these yearly conferences, both Oracle and even the company that I work for now, Workday. Every year, they have these yearly customer conferences. That was one of the highlights for me, every year, because it was a great way to interact with our customers, but also showcase, what our product teams had built, right? So we would have like these demo stands or demo booths where, I wouldn't mind, like I really enjoyed standing out there, showing the demo, talking to our end users and our customers, getting that quick feedback from them. That was always a great experience. And of course, it was always a great event, like especially I think Oracle, after it had acquired a lot of companies like Sun and some of the other acquisitions, that conference was one of the largest conferences that would come into San Francisco, right, which is where I lived. So it was amazing. Like downtown, we would like pretty much close out, all of downtown, take on one of the really big conference centers and host this event. And, our customers also, I think, enjoyed coming and speaking to us. And then also analysts, right? Like industry analysts like Gartner and like other analysts would also come out there to, talk to us. So it was always a very great experience to talk about like our innovations, our product, what we are building for the next year, the roadmap, and just get all that customer feedback.
Wow. Fantastic. In fact, was it very difficult for you to move from Oracle? I know you are working with Workday right now, to do that move from Oracle to Workday, particularly you are working back in the engineering side of it. Was that a smooth transition back into engineering? How did that happen?
Yeah, so again, another interesting journey, right? So when I was at Oracle, I had the opportunity to work with some really good engineering team, specifically a VP who was managing one of our teams. And at one point, they went off and they started their own startup company. I didn't join them at that time, very small startup company. And then a couple of years later, that company got acquired by Workday. And once that happened, they actually reached out to me and, were asking if I would be interested in joining them at Workday. And at that time, I had by then spent almost 15 years at Oracle. Wow. And I thought it's a good change. And I still get to be in the Bay Area, right? Like, which is where Workday was also located. So I was like, this is great. I get an opportunity to also work with this engineering team, which, I had some really brilliant, smart people. And I had really enjoyed working with them. And they were based out of another region in Boulder in Colorado. And then, they were like, hey, Workday is located in Bay Area where you are. Like, I can be the product manager and sort of like help, as a conduit. And so that's how, I decided, it's time to like wrap up at Oracle and follow them here to Workday. So it's been really an amazing journey. And for me also, the affirmation that, building people networks is also very important, right? Like you can be an engineer, you can be a product management, but I still feel like if you work with really good people, high performing teams, and, it makes a huge difference. That experience that you have, your engagement at work, your joy for work, it really is great when you work with people that you really like. And for me, that was number one. I said, let me, come and work with this team. And at that time, Workday also was known for its culture, of course, very different from Oracle, because the people who started Workday were, the original founders of PeopleSoft. And after Oracle, took over PeopleSoft, they decided to go start Workday. It was a completely different culture. So I was like, I had heard so much about the culture of the company as well. So for me, that was also another very important factor to say like, hey, this is another company that I want to go try. And then I felt like I could also offer something, it was also an enterprise software company, which is where I had a lot of experience. And I felt like that I could bring some of that experience as well into my new organization. So I came into Workday, and now I've been there for almost 10 years at Workday. Again, I had started in Workday. Now it's sort of that reverse, right? At Workday, I started as in product management and, managing like more of these innovative products. Like I said, a startup had been acquired. We've like integrated that into Workday. So building a little bit more of that innovation, into some of the Workday products, learning about Workday. And Workday has some amazing customers, right? They were like one of Workday's like core values is also like, customers and customer satisfaction. And so we have some amazing customers. So again, going and, talking to those customers, getting their feedback, all of that, has made it really very exciting. So that's kind of the start of my, Workday journey when I started as PM.
Very nice, because Workday also is known for disrupting the whole HR software, and compared to, it's very similar to Salesforce. If you can, Salesforce has completely disrupted the
on the sales, yeah.
Yeah.
And they both started around the same time, right? Like
Yeah.
Salesforce was putting sales and marketing into the cloud, and Workday said we are the first HR and financial ERP software into the cloud. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised that you had the best of the time with working with customer satisfaction, because if you think about it, one of the best people whom you can interact with in the whole globe will be working with HR, because they are generally also personable in terms of
Yes.
their persona and how they work with people. So was it very straightforward for you to move from a different domain in Oracle, working in product innovation, even though product innovation is the same horizontal, but you had to switch domains when you moved to Workday? How was that domain transition?
I think that is where being at Workday has really, the people-centric company or the employee-centric company that it is has really helped. So I had to come in and I had exposure to HR domain, for example, working at Oracle, but here, really going deep, right? Like more in depth into that, HR domain, financials, the ERP suite of products, as well as, looking at it from a perspective of how Workday has been, again, HR company, we have to be very careful with customers' data. It's like trusted data. Data has to be compliant, and all of that. We need to make sure that we understand the risk and we keep our data like protected and secure for our customers, right? So understanding how like Workday had like this unique one platform of building, in the cloud, all of that I think were what really helped me in the beginning to like really understand all of that. And for that, I think where I felt that really helped again, like, Workday being a very people-centric, employee-centric culture, is working with all these different teams across, like cross collaboration, I learned was very important. So I still joke saying like some of my best friends are actually in the legal and the compliance and the security team, because for me it was very important that I learned like, what are the things we need to do to make sure that customers' HR data, financial data is secured, it's, compliant and, free from risks, and working with these teams from a product perspective, right? Like when you're building product and you're engineering product, like have that partnership, that collaboration early on with our product legal teams and compliance teams. I think that was really important. So it wasn't just learning the domain, but some of it was also learning some of the processes around how we can build software that's, trusted and used by our customers.
Wow, okay. That's very cool, because in the end of the day, each country will also have different HR processes, and how each of them will also change dramatically, right? Because that's a very unique way to think about it, Indra. I have a couple of questions around your. I know you have been part of NEYTHRI investment circle, and that is also close to what I do right now at Sangatma. So I want to ask more questions around that. You are working in all this amazing HR solutions in Workday. I see that around the same time you also become interested in the whole investment space. I see that you're part of a fund. I don't know if that is you're comfortable talking about it, about the fund itself, being an investor. What pulled you towards that? And particularly, I know in India, only 2% of startups are run by women. Women, when I say more than 50% women. While if you look at the workforce, there are 40% women in workforce, and so is in the social sector or teaching sector. But very, very few and far between when it comes to actual startups and so I'm just checking how did you get interested in that space?
Okay. So I actually was a part of, I was first interested in NEYTHRI, the professional networking part of it, before the fund itself. The fund was sort of I guess the byproduct of me being part of that NEYTHRI circle. So NEYTHRI, and I don't know how much you looked into it, but in the US, it's basically for South Asian professional women to like have a space to like engage and have a community itself. So this was really something that, as part of being in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, I had been to, typically a lot of like these networking, events, right? Like there would be like women in product or women in tech meetups. And typically you go to a lot of these networking events, and that's how you build up like your network in the Bay Area. But then it was actually sometime during COVID when, all of us were working from home that I heard about NEYTHRI. And at that time, they were having a lot of online events. And I joined some of them, and it was really great to see like this community of, South Asian network. And living in the US, like I had been, living in the US for almost more than 25 years, I finally felt like, oh, this is your tribe, right? Like you see people who are like you, such successful women. And also it was not just women in tech, which was another thing I really liked about NEYTHRI as well. That there were, people from all different, industries. So, like maybe banking, financial sector, like healthcare, education. So it was a really strong, powerful, network of women. And it was an amazing experience, really, because especially, during COVID, like all of us working from home, there was some connection that you had like with this community of people. And then once we got out of COVID, there were like other, networking events that happened as well. One of which was they created something called if you became a member, then for members, they had things like salons where you could, potentially those of us who lived in a particular area, like 6 to 8 of us, we could form a salon. We'd meet like once a month or once in 2 months, so a little bit more like, physically as well. You got to see people and interact with them. It was amazing that I've discovered that there were so many people who were part of that NEYTHRI who lived like right within 10 minutes, maybe even walking distance of where I was. And I didn't even know they were there till I, joined NEYTHRI itself. And of course, then there was NEYTHRI had set up this investment fund, and I wanted to contribute to it in some meaningful way. I haven't been deeply involved in it. There's a group of people who manage the fund itself, to figure out like which companies are part of the fund. But yes, I did invest in it for the same reason, that you were saying, that there isn't enough, funding available, or you need more representation of women, and how do we empower them to be more, founders. Like I have great respect for people who are entrepreneurial, who take risks, right? Like I feel like I've done the safe thing by working in enterprise companies, but I know like how much it must be to like, want to get the funds if you have an idea, and I want to like really, empower them and give them a voice and a space as well. So that's how I got interested, and I've invested in the fund. But the fund itself is managed obviously by people from the NEYTHRI organization, and I haven't been really involved very deeply in it.
Very nice. And have you found a tribe now that you're in India? I think you've been in India for what, less than a year?
Yeah, just about a year coming up now, Gayatri. Yeah. No, it's been, again, like my journey to India has also been like very great, returning back after 30 years and then coming to Chennai. Like I said, I spent 1 year in Chennai, but Chennai had completely changed, right? Like I couldn't like recognize most places. The beach, of course, is fabulous, but I love it. But it's been amazing coming back and having this opportunity to come and set up Workday's office here and scale it in this last 1 year and grow it. And again, like amazing talent, finding really great people, connecting with them. It's been a really, really good experience. But one of the things that I was also, when I was coming back, obviously thinking a lot about, how is it going to work out here personally? It was fine because I have family close by, but professionally, I felt like I had a really good big network in the Bay Area, having lived there for so long. But that's been really good coming out here. I think through friends, have been introduced into a couple of different, organizations, and built up some of that professional network as well. So it's been really good.
Fantastic. I just realized I didn't ask you why you took the decision to move. I know after 3 decades. I think. I mean, was there a personal reason, or was it purely professional? What made you take that decision?
It was purely professional, actually, so Workday, was looking at, what is a sort of one of our strategic locations outside of the US, because we did want to set up operations, looking for, as Workday is global, growing, expanding globally, we felt like we also wanted to have some presence outside. We do have a site in Dublin, Ireland, which is a big, products and technology, but we were looking for another site in India. And when Chennai was chosen, I felt like, okay, it's like, someone's calling out to me, right? It was a great opportunity. I felt that to come and set up Workday, and I wanted to be successful, in the state where I am from. It felt like a matter of pride as well. And so that was one of the biggest reasons, right? They were looking for a permanent site leader. They wanted, of course, someone from the US to come here, because it would help, like, in the initial stages to set it up and, be communicating with stakeholders and sort of bring that experience. Like I've had an amazing 10-year experience at Workday, and bring that same culture and experience out here, but also blend it with the local culture. And I felt, okay, I speak the language Tamil, so that's really good. And, culturally, I understand, the culture here, and I will be able to fit in. But most of all, it was that opportunity I felt, right? Like I had built products, I was on the PM side, the software side, and I was like, okay, this is more like operations, but also being very strategic about how we set up the site, what kind of products we want to build here, how do we organize teams here to be successful, how can we empower them to like be be autonomous, all of that, and bring that Workday culture in was very important. So when I heard that they were looking for someone, I basically put my hand up and said, hey, can I be considered? So it was purely from an opportunity and a professional perspective. But it's been great otherwise too, because I'm able to spend a little bit more time with my family and my parents here.
Very, very cool, Indra. I think this is fantastic, right? In terms of bringing back your own learning and creating that roots, if you will, for so many people. And one of the things I often tell executives like yourself is it's while startup and startup life is cool, but staying in an executive role and building the careers for so many hundreds of people and training them and mentoring them is a calling by in itself. It is not because it has its own a flow, right? You will actually have your flow, as well as it's also not straightforward to say there will be no failures in large organization. There will be times when your metal is tested. So are there any points in which your metal has been tested and said, man, this is extremely hairy problem, how do I solve it? Has there been such cases that you can share without breaking confidentiality, of course?
Yeah, no. So one thing is, yes, what you talked about being a very fulfilling experience. That's kind of what I'm experiencing right now, coming here to Chennai and setting this up. I feel like it's been really rewarding and fulfilling. Like I feel like a sense of purpose, because it's like, okay, you have to go and scale, but make the people here really successful. And we've had some amazing talent here. Like this is what has really energized me this last 1 year, setting up the site is, all that talent here. Like especially we did college recruiting and hired like interns, and they're just amazing, the kids coming out of college here, right? Like with all this AI native skills and all of that. So it's been really rewarding when I think about it. I'm making a big push to ensure that we are a lot more gender diversity as well, like especially, seeing women leaders. I think empowering them, it's something that I have been really striving for. So doing a lot of mentorship, guidance for all of them, making sure that, as we are hiring as well, being very thoughtful of what does that pipeline look like to make sure there's enough, gender diversity in the pipeline. We're bringing more women into that, leadership positions and growing them. That's been, I think, for me, the more personal thing. From a challenges perspective, so far, I would say in Chennai, it's been going pretty well. But I'm sure, as you said, there will be something, right? Like year one is like, I think it's the honeymoon phase. Everybody's come in, they're all new. And I'm sure we'll go through some challenges along the way itself. So far though, it's been going pretty well.
Excellent. I was talking about more from a Harry problem, not just with Chennai, but over your career. Has there been any decisions that you had to take, which were difficult decisions, that you can share with us? Now that you think about it, it was a right thing to do. Was there any anecdote or anything that you want to share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely been, quite a few, right? Like you don't go through that's how you get the experience, and you learn to be, you learn from it, and you're more resilient. When as part of like one of the organizations, we wanted to introduce like a really new technology to our customers. At that time, this was more than 5 years back, before all the LLMs and all that, we wanted to introduce a chatbot. So it was very new for, even our customers, right? And some of it was like, hey, we want to see what a different user experience can be. How can people use natural language processing to ask questions and receive information? But it was something very, very new to all of our customers and our end users as well. So a lot of that meant like we had to think about, we can't just release this product as it is. So how do we have like a very sort of structured program on, getting feedback from early adopters? We need some customers who are willing to test with us and validate, give us access to their data, right? And that was very important. Like the data had to be like good data, where it had to be production data, not like test type of data. So how do we earn the trust of our customers, right? In order for them to help us, how do we bring them on this journey of innovation with us? So those are some of the areas where we had to really think through it. And, it was something that we learned along the way, right? But one of the things that we did, I think what we did, right, at least was saying like, okay, let's take a very small customer base, even if it's like 2-3 customers, and then the company itself also using it internally, like, use your own product to get feedback feedback. That was the one area we really put a guardrail on, saying, let's not this is not something you can release to all customers. And then, if something goes wrong, if there's data leakage or security or risk. And again, as you said, different countries have different compliance needs, right? Like what you can do with the customer data. So we had to be very selective, and it kind of slowed us down to some extent, right? Like you can't go so fast. You only have small number of customers. But I think that was one of the areas where we did learn, picking, smaller group of customers, getting that feedback, but being able to quickly iterate. So then again, some challenges internally so that teams get used to this sort of new ways of working. So that's one of the things that, I think really learned some good lessons from it, but again, thinking through, working, directly with customers, taking that feedback, I think helped us. Internally, we tried to make sure we can have, at least on our end, quicker decision making, so that when we learn something, you can quickly make a decision and, rapidly prototype again and iterate on different results. So for that, I had an opportunity where I could bring a small group of people at that time, engineering and product management. So I could manage them and be that sort of quick, decision maker, where it was a little faster and quicker, so that otherwise in big organizations, sometimes you go, it's product is in one side, engineering, and you have to go all the way up the chain to make these decisions. There is where I think Workday also gave me the opportunity to be able to lead such projects, where I could have that, quick, have product engineering under me, be able to make some of these decisions so that we could iterate and move faster.
Wow, this is amazing story. See, in the end of the day, as long as there is a ability for you to bounce, like the G.R. Damodaran story that you mentioned in terms of growth mindset, I think that is really key in terms of understanding what is happening under the hood, and moving forward. Indra, I'm realizing the time. I can't even believe that it has been such a long.
No,
It's very
thank
close
you
to
for
time.
mentioning the whole growth mindset. I think for me, that's been, if I was to give advice to someone, if anyone wants to hear, I would say continue to learn and grow. And especially now, we are in such an exciting time. When I think of my career, right, the last 30 years, and I've seen the different shifts, right, on-premise to cloud, and you said e-commerce at one point, the shift to mobile. But now with this AI, AI era, this I think is the most exciting that I've, felt. And things are moving so rapidly. So if you're not willing to have that growth mindset, you can definitely be left behind.
Yeah, and I mean, also how exciting it is in terms of learning and availability of information. Huh? It's no
Oh,
longer
yeah.
that you have to be in Stanford to know design thinking or the best of the minds. You actually, it's a lot more
It's so much
democratic.
more accessible, and it makes it more inclusive for people, right? And I see that now, I think, coming to India, where, at every level it's accessible, across age, across it's not just demographics, but across urban population or rural population, right? I feel like this is what's really going to be a game changer for everyone. Even beyond that, one of the things I was blown away by coming to India is how there's an app for everything, which has made my life so much convenient in the last year. Pay your bills, or get help, or service delivery and food delivery and all of that, and it's so quick and easy. That itself is a big leaps and bounds compared to the India I left obviously many years ago. But I think the AI is definitely going to make it, I feel, a lot more accessible and inclusive for at all levels of our society as well. Yeah. And it's funny because now I taught my parents how to use ChatGPT, so now they're always asking it questions.
I've not done that. I should have. It's a good reminder for me to do it. I just taught for my help, which who comes, and I taught her how to use it. And in fact, I taught her how to use a local language rather than,
Oh,
typing.
that's
So,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
that's the other thing I see. Sometimes the other thing I see people do a lot of here is use the voice, right, for translation and things like that. I see that more in India than probably, when I was in the US, that how easy it is for them to use their native language. They talk into it, that translates. And then again, information is now accessible to them as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. When you actually, I heard a lot of people using voice note to actually communicate. Earlier, there will be a typing, even if it is a native language. Typing is a bigger problem for different sets of
Hmm.
people. So all you have to do is voice note, and it is all clear. And
Right.
voice to text and text to voice is a lot more, making it easy for people to do what they want to, as long as they don't
Right.
get they have a goal where they want to go. So thank you so much, Indra. I just wanted to wanted you to any last thoughts or advice apart from having the growth mindset and continuing to learn. Any advice that you want to share to our listeners?
Adding to that is like be curious, right? Stay curious. Like I said, this is an exciting time to be in. But don't forget that at the end of the day, it's still, for me, having a network or connections with people, collaborating with people, that makes the big difference, right? Like when you're going into work, for example, or you're working with a group of people, like, you want to have the joy of working with them still, right? Sure, there's like AI and AI agents that can help you, but at the end of the day, I think we're all human centric. Like, how do you serve your customers? How do you, work within a team? And I think that's still very important. So I'm always telling people, like, don't forget the human element of it, right? That's still the most important thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Indra. Thank you. Thank you. I know we've been trying to get you in from March, and I'm so happy that we are able to talk to you now, Indra.
Oh,
Thank you so
absolutely. It was
much
a
for your
joy
time.
to speak to you today, Gayatri, and thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.